This week on Jared Scott Outdoors, we're going elk hunting. Now, we're after cow elk, and we're up in some pretty high country, actually. I've got Jared McCrory, and again, we're in some high country. He lives in Wisconsin, and so he's in the flatland, and anyways, we're gonna bust his butt out here and see if we can get a cow elk. So let's get after it. Like most hunts, we use the early hours of the morning to hike into some high country that might hold elk or deer. But as the sunlight started to peek over the distant mountains, we were still unable to see anything. That's because such a thick fog had set in. We kept hiking to the high point we wanted to get to Glass from, hoping that by the time we got there, the fog would have lifted. To that, we were very disappointed. We just hung out and waited, knowing it would clear out eventually. Every now and then we'd get a quick opening of the fog that would allow us to see a few spots here and there, and then finally after nearly 2 hours the fog was blown out by a fairly strong wind, and so we were finally able to start glassing. The problem was that while the fog had lifted, we now had missed the morning hours when the deer and elk are typically out feeding, and for the most part we couldn't spot anything.
It's just quiet, so we're going to head off to a different ridge now and see if we can find some elk.
We covered some miles as we headed off in another direction, glassing as we went. Fortunately, we ran into another hunter after deer that told us about some elk he had seen down in a pretty deep canyon. He didn't think they'd be too hard to find, he just knew they were in a tough spot if you got one to have to pack it back out. Between Jared and I, we figured we could pack out a cow elk, even if it was tough, so we decided to see if we could find them. Again, because it was so far down the backside of the ridge we were on, it was a bit of a hike with lots of slipping and sliding as we worked over to the vantage point that would allow us to see into the area we hoped the elk would be in.
Quite good, right?
Yeah, it's not. It's a cow.
Looking across in some thin openings, we spotted an elk disappear behind some trees. Even if we couldn't see one now, at least we now knew where they were. We were able to spot a few elk as they briefly fed through some gaps in the trees, and then suddenly, one fed out into the open. The first elk we had seen had fed into the trees and only appeared to be feeding away from us, so there was a bit of urgency as we knew this cow would also feed away and out of sight if we waited too long.
What about?
Jared repositioned a couple times trying to find a good stable shooting angle. The elk was at 400 yards, which is definitely doable if Jared could get on a good solid dead rest. He found a good rest in using a split branch sticking straight up from the downfall in front of us. Now with this being a cow hunt, we both verified that neither one of us could see any antlers on this elk. Jared was set for the shot and I was ready with the camera, so it was go time.
It's right there. It's just some yellow leaves.
As I waited for the shot to happen, Jared said he wasn't comfortable with the shot as its vitals were covered. I told him it was just a few yellow leaves from a small aspen, but again he looked at me and said he didn't like the shot. Well, I didn't want him to take a shot he wasn't comfortable with, so when it moved again, I let him know that it was clear.
Okay, it's moved. It's moved.
He, on the other hand, said he still wasn't comfortable with the shot, and that's when we realized we were both looking at different elk.
It's facing uphill right now. Looking to the left now.
He had been looking at an elk that was feeding behind a pine tree and that was now out of sight. Now the confusion all made sense. I explained where the elk was that I was looking at, and now with both of us looking at the same elk, it was once again time to make it happen.
Yeah, just let that gust die down. I'm good whenever. Put another one in. Go again. Shoot again. It's not hit. It looked like it. I think so. I saw a flinch and then it went down. Ran down.
With the elk out of sight but looking hit, it completely disappeared from view. I was sure it looked hit, but of course not seeing it makes you second guess what you thought you saw.
Alright, so I hit it, and so it tumbled down to the thicker trees on the left side of it.
Before we could get over to where the elk had disappeared, we had to first make it down this slick and steep hillside.
It's at least 1,000-foot climb, if not more, straight up out of this hole. And we knew that was the situation, and still
still went ahead and took it anyways. We figure it'll be a killer hike out, but that's easier than another day out in the field. So tromping around trying to find one in a better spot. If you got them, may as well do it. As we headed back up the north face toward the elk, we found that we could barely keep our footing. In fact, I had to put the camera away so I could have my hands free to help pull and catch me when I slipped, which would happen many times.
I think this is where that first one was.
Finally making it up to the area where the elk had been, we started finding tracks from where the elk were feeding. And then we spotted a spot that looked like an animal had slid down the hillside.
That looks like a slide.
Alright, so we found the point of impact. Looks like I missed on the first shot and then got on the second shot and it fell down right here and slid all the way back down.
With an obvious path to follow, we headed down along the slide.
Oh, yeah, it's right there.
You can see it?
That's it right there. It didn't ever get up.
I still can't see it.
Right in front of you, 5 yards. Buried in those trees.
Oh, good.
And as soon as it moves, it's going another 100 yards. Holy cow. This is going to be by far the worst one I've had to try to get out of some trees. However, there are no antlers. That will make it much nicer.
No head to carry out. The best way to...
I have no idea. We just got to go get to it. We're going to have to take it down. There's no way to bring it up. Unless we can get it to stick. Oh boy. Holy cow.
It's not just wedged in there.
It is. It's completely... And it is wedged in there. Holy smokes.
Finally, we decided the only way about this was to break it free and let it slide even further down the hillside to the bottom of the draw where we would actually get our footing while we worked on it. Getting it free, it did just what we thought and finally came to a stop 200 feet below. Our only problem now was that we had to get down there, and it was all we could do to keep our feet under us. In fact, at times, it was easier just to slide down as well.
All right. Time to turn the camera off so I can get down without dying.
Oh, there she is.
That's a chute right there, man. Even without snow, that'd be tough.
All right, so Jared, congratulations. First cow elk, right?
First elk.
First elk, all right. So first elk, and I told him, you know, we knew this was going to be a hard hike out just from where we were hunting. So I said, find a small cow, a small, young, tender cow. I think he got a big one. This looks really big because we've got about 1,200 feet. We just checked. We've got to climb 1,200 feet out of this hole, and it's almost dark. So
They move a lot faster on 4 feet than they do on 2.
oh man. So we'll be deboning this one for sure, and we'll be doing that, of course, in the dark and hiking it out. It'll be a long night, but it'll be done. So tough work, and he'll be able to fill his freezer and last for a long time with this to feed his family. So congratulations, way to go. Nice shot, and again it just dropped and came right down. So now the work begins.
Yes, it does.
Knowing how cold it would get as it got dark and that we had a lot of work ahead of us, we hurried as fast as we could to debone the elk and start packing it out. By about 8 p.m., well after dark, we were packed and heading on up the mountain. However, it didn't take long to realize that we were in for a long, painful night.
We have definitely decided that next time Jared wants to go down into some canyon like this to shoot a cow elk, we're going to say no. Actually, it's probably as much my fault as anybody else's, but oh my, this has been the hardest pack out I think I've ever done. Just for the pain on going up this hill. We've only covered maybe a half mile if we're lucky in 2 hours. and we still have a few hundred more feet of elevation to gain. So it's one of those 30 steps at a time, and then you got to take a break if you're lucky to get that far, and then every few breaks you got to just sit down and give your legs and hips and everything a break, because it just hurts and burns. And anyways, it's going to be well after midnight. We'll be lucky if we get to the truck at midnight, and obviously well after that to get home. But get knocked down, you got to pack it out.
All right, so we are back at the truck now, and I'll tell you what, that was quite the deal. It's 1:30 now in the morning, but we made it. We made it up that hill. So, Jared, what do you think?
I think that's the first time and the last time we'll do that.
I agree. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to the Jared Scott Outdoors YouTube channel.